Imagine a history class where the textbooks skip the most terrifying, most audacious chapters. A history where the pursuit of power pushed technological boundaries to breaking point, creating weapons so radical, so far ahead of their time, that their very existence was almost swept under the rug. We all know about the V-2 rocket, perhaps the Me-262 jet fighter. But what if those were just the tip of a chilling iceberg? What if, buried deep within the dark ambitions of the Third Reich, lay blueprints and prototypes for superweapons that history books rarely dared to mention? This isn't about conspiracy theories. It's about the documented, yet largely untold, story of Hitler's most extreme technological obsessions. We're talking about concepts that defy conventional warfare, pushing the limits of physics, engineering, and sheer human imagination, often with a brutal disregard for cost or consequence. These weren't just bigger bombs. They were tools designed to change the very nature of conflict, to guarantee dominance, or to inflict unimaginable terror. The world remembers the outcome of World War II, but the full story of the clandestine race for absolute technological superiority remains largely hidden. These lost superweapons, though many never saw full deployment, profoundly shaped the post-war world. They secretly accelerated the arms race, inspired decades of Cold War research, and forced victorious nations to grapple with the disturbing implications of unchecked scientific ambition. Join us as we pull back the curtain on Hitler's lost superweapons, what they never showed in school. We'll journey from the whispered dreams of a desperate regime to the chilling reality of their designs, exploring how these astonishing, often terrifying, innovations left an indelible, if often unacknowledged, mark on the trajectory of global military and scientific development. Before the frenzied pursuit of wonder weapons in the latter half of World War II, a fundamental problem plagued military strategists: how to project power, deliver payloads, and achieve decisive victory with efficiency and overwhelming force. Traditional artillery, though powerful, was limited by range and mobility. Aircraft, while offering range, were vulnerable to enemy fighters and anti-aircraft fire. The desire for a weapon that could strike with impunity, from a distance, and with devastating effect, was a dream that predated the Third Reich by decades. Early, human ideas around projectile warfare, from catapults to cannons, always aimed to hit harder and reach further. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw the birth of true rocketry, not as a weapon, but as a scientific curiosity. Visionaries like Russian Konstantin Tsiolkovsky theorized about multi-stage rockets and liquid propellants, foreseeing space travel. In America, Robert H. Goddard launched the first liquid-fueled rocket in 1926, a sputtering, brief flight that was dismissed by many as eccentric. These early thinkers weren't driven by military conquest, but by scientific exploration, yet their work laid the essential groundwork for what would become instruments of war. In Germany, however, the Treaty of Versailles, which severely restricted conventional weaponry after World War I, inadvertently created a unique incubator for unconventional warfare concepts, denied tanks, heavy artillery, and a large air force. Ambitious German engineers and military planners began to look for loopholes. They turned their attention to rocketry, which was not explicitly forbidden by the treaty. This seemingly innocuous scientific pursuit, often disguised as civilian space research, became a clandestine military endeavor. One key early figure was Hermann Oberth, a Romanian-German physicist whose influential 1923 book, The Rocket Into Interplanetary Space, inspired a generation of German rocketeers, including a young Werner von Braun. Oberth's theoretical work on large-scale liquid-fueled rockets, while purely scientific, ignited the imagination of military minds who saw its terrifying potential. Early attempts were crude, marked by spectacular failures and dangerous experiments. The VFR, Verein für Raumschifffahrt Society for Space Travel, a German amateur rocket group, conducted numerous test launches in the late 1920s and early 1930s. Their Mirak and Repulsor rockets were small, often unstable and prone to exploding. They faced technical challenges with propellant mixtures, engine cooling, and guidance stability. Socially, they were seen as eccentrics, dismissed by mainstream science. Financially, they often scraped by on meager funds. But slowly, the idea began to take shape. The German army, particularly its artillery branch, recognized the inherent advantage of rockets: no recoil, high speed, and eventually, immense range. They secretly funded small-scale research. The initial goal wasn't a superweapon in the grand sense, but simply a long-range artillery piece that bypassed treaty limitations. This clandestine, persistent effort, nurtured in the shadows of post-WWI restrictions, would eventually transform the abstract theories of spaceflight into the horrifying reality of the V-2 ballistic missile. The groundwork for unimaginable destruction was being laid piece by painstaking piece, long before the world fully understood the dark trajectory Germany was charting. The crucial turning point, the true spark that ignited the pursuit of Hitler's superweapons, came with the formal integration of civilian rocket science into the German military apparatus. This was no longer about academic curiosity or amateur experimentation. It was a state-sponsored, top-secret project, driven by the belief that ultimate power lay in unprecedented technological superiority. The problem they sought to solve was how to strike an enemy with a weapon that was impossible to intercept, deliver with overwhelming force. The undisputed key inventor here was Wernher von Braun, a brilliant, ambitious young physicist and engineer. Von Braun had been fascinated by rockets since childhood. His background in physics and engineering, combined with an almost visionary understanding of rocketry, made him the ideal figurehead for this nascent field. His motivation, initially, was purely scientific, to build rockets that could reach space. However, as the Nazi regime gained power, his scientific ambitions became inextricably linked with military applications. He joined the German Army's rocket program in 1932, and by 1937, became the technical director of the new secret rocket research facility at Peenemünde on the Baltic coast. At Peenemünde, von Braun and his team set about building the world's first long-range ballistic missile, initially designated the A-4, later infamously known as the V-2. The first working model was a monumental feat of engineering for its time. It was a massive liquid-fueled rocket standing 14 meters tall, capable of carrying a 1-ton warhead. Its function was simple: launch vertically, then follow a pre-programmed ballistic trajectory to impact hundreds of kilometers away. It was an intercontinental ballistic missile before the term existed. The major technical breakthrough was multifaceted. It wasn't just one invention, but a synergy of advanced concepts. Firstly, the powerful liquid propellant engine, using alcohol and liquid oxygen, generated immense thrust, propelling the rocket to the edge of space. This required innovative turbopumps and advanced cooling systems. Secondly, and perhaps most crucially, was the inertial guidance system. Unlike earlier rockets that relied on radio control, which could be jammed, the V-2 used a sophisticated system of gyroscopes and accelerometers to maintain its trajectory. This autonomous guidance made it virtually impossible to deflect once launched. Third was aerodynamic stability at supersonic speeds upon re-entry, requiring robust materials and precise shaping. Obstacles were constant and immense. Technical hurdles included catastrophic engine failures, guidance system malfunctions, and structural integrity issues under extreme flight stresses. Early tests frequently ended in explosions or uncontrolled flights. Financial obstacles were overcome by the immense, almost limitless, resources poured into the project by the Nazi regime, viewing it as the ultimate weapon. Perhaps the most significant social and ethical obstacle was the moral compromise of working for a regime engaged in mass atrocities. This was often overcome by intense pressure, ideological alignment, or simply the singular focus on the technical challenge. isolating the scientists from the brutal reality of the war and the forced labor used in their factories. The world's first true reaction came on October 3, 1942, when a V-rocket successfully launched and reached an altitude of 84.5 kilometers, briefly touching space before impacting accurately. Inside Peenemünde, it was met with euphoria and a desperate sense of triumph. Outside Germany, the world remained largely oblivious to this terrifying breakthrough, only realizing its devastating potential when the V2 South began raining down on London in late 1944. It was a weapon that arrived without warning, faster than sound, immune to interception, a true superweapon that heralded a new age of existential threat and fundamentally reshaped the future of rocketry and space exploration. From the successful launch of the A4 at Peenemünde, the concept of Hitler's superweapons entered a frantic and often desperate phase of chronological evolution. The goal was no longer merely to build a rocket, but to refine it, mass-produce it, and deploy it to turn the tide of a war that was increasingly turning against Germany. But the V2 was just one piece of a much larger, darker puzzle, as the regime pursued other radical concepts, pushing the boundaries of what was technologically feasible. The V2 program itself saw rapid, brutal development from 1942 to 1944. After the initial successful tests, the focus shifted to reliability, accuracy, and mass production. What changed? The guidance system was refined, reducing drift and improving impact precision, though still far from modern standards. Production shifted from Peenemünde to underground factories like Mittelwerk, where thousands of concentration camp prisoners were forced to assemble the rockets under horrific conditions. Who was responsible? Von Braun remained the technical lead, but the SS under General Hans Kammler took increasing control over production and deployment, prioritizing speed over human life. What was improved? Production efficiency and launch readiness, though at an immense human cost. How was it received by the world? When V2 South began raining down on London and Antwerp in September 1944, the world reacted with shock and terror. These were not just weapons. They were psychological warfare, arriving without warning or defense, leaving craters of devastation and sowing panic. This forced Allied intelligence to divert significant resources to locate and destroy launch sites. Beyond the V2, German engineers were simultaneously pursuing even more ambitious, lost superweapon concepts that often get overlooked. One such visionary was Dr. Eugen Senger, an Austrian aerospace engineer who, as early as the mid-1930s, proposed the concept of an antipodal bomber or America bomber. What changed? This wasn't a rocket. It was a theoretical suborbital bomber, designed to skip along the upper atmosphere like a stone on water, allowing it to fly intercontinental distances, bombard a target, and return to base. Who was responsible? Sanger and his colleague Irene Brett developed the detailed theoretical work and initial designs. What was improved? The concept pushed boundaries of hypersonic aerodynamics and ramjet propulsion far beyond anything existing. It envisioned a crude, reusable spaceplane decades before the X-15 or space shuttle. How was it received? Within the Luftwaffe, it was seen as incredibly ambitious, perhaps too complex for wartime production, but its potential to strike North America electrified Hitler's inner circle. Though no full-scale prototype was built, the detailed design, work in wind tunnel tests in the early 1940s laid critical theoretical groundwork for post-war aerospace research. Another radical, yet often forgotten, project was the Sun Gun, Sonnenschein, conceived by German physicist Hermann Oberth in 1929, but revisited in secret during the war. What changed? This was a proposed orbital weapon, essentially a giant space mirror, possibly several kilometers wide orbiting Earth, designed to focus the sun's rays on the specific ground targets. Who was responsible? While Oberth had the initial theoretical concept, it was reportedly explored by a German army artillery group at the end of the war. What was improved? It wasn't about conventional firepower, but about using the raw energy of the sun for unprecedented destruction or mass scorching. How was it received? It remained largely theoretical, a wild concept even for the Nazis' advanced weapons programs. But its very existence as a serious discussion point highlighted the desperate, almost fantastical, lengths to which they would go. It foreshadowed the later space-based weapon concepts of the Cold War. In the realm of aviation. Beyond the Me-262 jet fighter, the Germans experimented with truly unorthodox designs. The Hartenho 229 flying wing, mentioned previously, was remarkable not just for its shape, but for its potential radar-absorbing properties, a nascent form of stealth technology. What changed? This aircraft, first flown in March 1944, eschewed a conventional fuselage and tail, aiming for maximum aerodynamic efficiency and crucially reduced radar visibility. Its construction included wood plywood infused with carbon, a material believed to absorb electromagnetic waves. Who was responsible? The visionary brothers Raymar and Walter Horton. What was improved? Speed, range, and a potentially revolutionary ability to evade detection, anticipating radar countermeasures by decades. How was it received? Only a few prototypes were built, never seeing combat. However, when discovered by Allied forces after the war, particularly by the U.S. Operation Lusty teams, its advanced design and potential stealth capabilities were immediately recognized as revolutionary, directly influencing post-war American flying wing, bomber programs, and the eventual development of radar-evading aircraft. These projects were undertaken amidst rivalries between the Luftwaffe, Army, and SS, each vying for resources and control over these strategic weapons. Yet, despite the chaos and the eventual defeat, these radical ideas, these lost superweapons, remain hidden treasures for the victorious powers. They provided invaluable blueprints and inspiration, shaping the trajectory of the Cold War arms race and defining the very frontiers of aerospace and missile technology for generations to come. The dark ambition of the Third Reich left an undeniable, if uncomfortable, technological legacy. The true, if unsettling, mainstreaming of Hitler's superweapon concepts occurred not under the swastika, but under the flags of the victorious Allied powers. The explosion into the mainstream wasn't a sudden wartime shift, but a calculated, frantic scramble in the immediate aftermath of World War II as the Cold War began to cast its long, ominous shadow. Why now? The answer is brutally pragmatic: captured technology and expertise. When Allied forces swept into Germany in 1945, they uncovered not just the ruins of a defeated regime, but an astonishing trove of advanced scientific research, blueprints, and crucially, the very engineers and scientists who had conceived and built these Wunderwaffens. Both the United States and the Soviet Union, recognizing the unparalleled shortcut to military supremacy, launched secret operations, most famously the American Operation Paperclip, to acquire these assets. This was a direct, wholesale transfer of decades of cutting-edge research, bypassing the years of independent R&D that would have otherwise been necessary. It was governments, specifically the burgeoning superpowers, that led this charge. The geopolitical landscape of the emerging Cold War provided the perfect urgent crucible. The threat of nuclear weapons, developed almost concurrently, amplified the strategic value of missile delivery systems and high-speed aircraft. The V-2, a terror weapon in Nazi hands, became the foundational blueprint for the intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBMs, for both the U.S. and the USSR. Wernher von Braun and his team were central to the American space and missile program, while Soviet engineers similarly exploited captured German rocketry knowledge. This direct absorption of German technology rapidly changed daily life, industry, and strategic thinking. In rocketry, the V-2's legacy was immediate and profound. Its design principles, its engine technology, and its guidance systems directly informed the early ballistic missile programs of both superpowers. Within a decade, the US and Soviet Union were launching their own V-2 derivatives, rapidly developing the capabilities that would define the nuclear age. This ignited the space race, an epic technological rivalry that saw former Nazi rocket scientists playing pivotal roles in launching the first satellites, sending humans into orbit, and ultimately landing humanity on the moon. Entire new industries sprung up around space exploration and missile manufacturing, employing millions and driving advancements in metallurgy, electronics, and computing. In aviation, the German breakthroughs in jet propulsion and aerodynamic design, including early flying wings, fundamentally transformed air travel and combat. The Me-262's performance startled Allied air forces and instantly made propeller-driven fighters obsolete. Post-war, every major air power scrambled to develop its own jet aircraft, leading to the rapid proliferation of jetliners for commercial travel and supersonic fighters for military use. The very sound of our skies changed, and global travel became faster, shrinking distances and fostering unprecedented interconnectedness. Even the more esoteric concepts, like night vision and stealth principles, as seen in the Horton designs, quietly infiltrated military R&D. While not immediately mainstream, the ideas sparked continued research, leading to their eventual widespread adoption in specialized units and advanced aircraft designs. Decades later, the revolution was clear. The lost superweapons of Hitler were not merely a footnote in history. They were catalysts, providing the technological foundation that dramatically accelerated the Cold War arms race and launched humanity into the space age, permanently altering the trajectory of military strategy, industrial development, and global society. In the decades since World War II, the seeds planted by Hitler's lost superweapons have blossomed into entire fields of cutting-edge technology, undergoing relentless refinement and diversification. What were once ambitious, often crude, prototypes are now sleek, hyper-efficient, and incredibly sophisticated systems, shaping everything from global power dynamics to everyday life. In the last 20 years, the evolution has been driven by the explosive growth of digital computing, advanced materials, science, and miniaturization. The core principles might remain, but the execution is vastly different. Consider ballistic missile technology, the direct descendant of the V-2. We've moved from single warhead rockets to multiple independently targetable reentry vehicles, MIRVs, allowing a single missile to deliver multiple warheads to different targets. Accuracy, once measured in kilometers, is now down to meters, thanks to incredibly precise inertial navigation systems, INS, enhanced by GPS and celestial navigation. The threat has diversified to include hypersonic glide vehicles, which maneuver at speeds over Mach 5, posing an entirely new challenge for defense. Key players like the United States with its Minuteman III, Russia with the Topol-M and Sarmat, and China with the DF-41 continue to refine these ultimate deterrents. Their modern use is primarily strategic deterrence, ensuring global stability through the terrifying concept of mutually assured destruction, but also includes advanced space launch capabilities. Jet propulsion, stemming from the Me-262's pioneering design, has undergone continuous dramatic improvement. Over the past 2 decades, we've seen a monumental shift towards fuel efficiency, reduced emissions, and stealth integration. Modern jet engines are lighter, more powerful, and quieter, thanks to advanced composites and sophisticated aerodynamic designs. Beyond military applications, this technology has diversified to power the vast majority of commercial airliners, shrinking the world and enabling global commerce and tourism on an unprecedented scale. Major players like General Electric, Rolls-Royce, and Pratt & Whitney dominate this multi-billion-dollar industry. The major issues today involve the environmental impact of aviation and the ongoing quest for quieter, more sustainable flight, leading to research in electric and hybrid propulsion, the nascent concepts of radar-evading aircraft. Those early stealth inklings and designs like the Horton Flying Wing have matured into a foundational pillar of modern air power. In the last 20 years, the widespread deployment of fifth-generation fighter jets like the F-22 Raptor and F-35 Lightning II, along with strategic bombers like the B-2 Spirit, represents the zenith of this evolution. These aircraft are designed from the ground up with low observable characteristics achieved through precise shaping, radar-absorbent materials, and sophisticated electronic warfare systems. The technology has diversified from just stealth to signature management, encompassing not just radar, but also infrared, acoustic, and even visual signatures. The key players are primarily the United States and, increasingly, China and Russia, who are developing their own stealth platforms. The modern use of stealth aircraft is to penetrate heavily defended airspace, conduct reconnaissance, and deliver precision strikes with minimal risk. Ethical debates often revolve around the massive cost of these platforms and the potential for an escalating, opaque arms race. These lost superweapons, once confined to the desperate ambitions of a defeated regime, have become cornerstones of our technological world. Their contemporary status reflects a continuous drive for greater precision, efficiency, and stealth, shaping military capabilities and influencing global society in profound, undeniable ways. The world before the genesis of these lost superweapons was one where strategic strikes were limited by the capabilities of manned bombers or conventional artillery. Distant targets offered relative safety, and defensive lines were drawn on maps, not in the upper atmosphere. The very concept of striking an enemy capital without warning, from hundreds of miles away, was science fiction. The impact of these innovations, however incomplete in their Nazi form, permanently changed global strategy and daily life. Global reach and nuclear deterrence. The V-2 rocket redefined warfare by introducing the ballistic missile. This innovation, more than any other, permanently linked the idea of global reach with the threat of instantaneous, inescapable attack. It directly led to the Cold War's nuclear deterrence, where nations held each other hostage with the threat of intercontinental devastation. This paradox of peace through terror reshaped geopolitics for nearly half a century and continues to influence strategic thinking today. The space age. The V-2 also directly launched the space age. The foundational rocketry principles, the engine, designs, and even the scientists themselves migrated to the United States and the Soviet Union, forming the bedrock of their space programs. Without the V-2, humanity's journey to Earth orbit, the Moon, and beyond would have been significantly delayed. Every satellite orbiting Earth, every space probe exploring the solar system, owes a conceptual debt to this wartime invention, revolution. In air travel and combat, the jet engine, pioneered by German engineers, completely revolutionized aviation. Before the Me-262, the skies were dominated by propeller aircraft. The jet's speed and efficiency quickly rendered them obsolete. This led to the development of the fast, high-flying commercial jetliners that shrank the globe, making international travel accessible and fostering unprecedented global commerce and cultural exchange. In combat, it ushered in the era of supersonic fighters and strategic bombers, forever changing aerial tactics and power projection, the dawn of stealth. While the Horton Flying Wing never saw mass production, its experimental use of radar-absorbing materials and its radical design planted the seed for stealth technology. This subtle yet profound concept evolved over decades into the virtually invisible aircraft that dominate modern air forces. It changed the fundamental rules of engagement, emphasizing evasion and undetectable penetration over brute force, influencing everything from aircraft design to naval vessel architecture. These were not merely technological advancements. They were turning points in human history. They forced us to confront the terrifying potential of our own ingenuity, pushing the boundaries of destruction while simultaneously unlocking pathways to explore the cosmos and connect the world in unprecedented ways. The dark ambition behind Hitler's lost superweapons cast a long shadow but also illuminated the future of technology in ways we are still grappling with today. So, what's next for the direct and indirect descendants of these lost superweapons? The technological arms race, ignited in part by these very innovations, continues to accelerate, pushing the boundaries of what's possible in warfare and beyond. Ballistic missiles, the cutting edge is now dominated by hypersonic weapons. These aren't just fast. They're maneuverable at extreme speeds, Mach 5 and above, making them incredibly difficult to track and intercept with current missile defense systems. Research is intensely focused on advanced guidance for these platforms and, conversely, on next-generation multi-layered defense networks, involving sophisticated space-based sensors and potentially new interceptor technologies like directed energy weapons. Think powerful lasers or high-power microwaves. Experts predict that within the next decade, we'll see preliminary deployments of these hypersonic systems and the initial countermeasures designed to combat them, fundamentally changing strategic stability. In jet propulsion, the drive is overwhelmingly towards sustainability and stealth integration. Beyond the conventional jet engine, research is booming in sustainable aviation fuels, SAFs, aiming for carbon-neutral flight. We're also seeing the serious development of electric and hybrid electric aircraft for regional and even potentially larger commercial applications, though overcoming battery weight and power density remains a significant hurdle. Militarily, the focus is on integrating artificial intelligence into propulsion systems for predictive maintenance and even more efficient thrusts, while pushing for greater stealth capabilities in future designs. The concept of stealth, initially a crude aspiration, is evolving into total signature management. This means not just reducing radar cross-section, but also minimizing infrared, acoustic, and even visual signatures across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Future stealth platforms might feature adaptive skins that can change their properties in real time to evade detection, or employ cognitive electronic warfare that uses AI to analyze and counter new threats instantly. The race is on for the sixth-generation fighter, which promises even greater levels of stealth, integrated AI, and network-centric capabilities. This intense focus on undetectability raises fundamental questions about future conflict, where the ability to see your enemy might be the ultimate advantage. These once lost superweapons, born from a desperate and dark ambition, continue to be pivotal. Their evolution reflects a persistent human drive to overcome limitations, whether for destruction or progress. How will these advancements shape global power in the coming decades, and what new ethical considerations will they force us to confront? From the chilling ambitions fueled by the Treaty of Versailles to the desperate final days of World War II, Hitler's lost superweapons, from the pioneering V-2 rocket to the radical Horten flying wing, were not just wartime curiosities. They were technological seeds planted in a dark era that grew to redefine the very landscape of global power and scientific advancement. Though many never reached full deployment in their original form, their designs, their principles, and the very scientists behind them profoundly accelerated the trajectory of rocketry, jet propulsion, and stealth technology for decades to come. This journey through a hidden chapter of innovation reveals a crucial truth, even from humanity's darkest impulses. Incredible, often terrifying, leaps in technology can emerge. The legacy of these superweapons is not just in their destructive potential, but in how they inadvertently propelled us into the space age, reshaped aerial warfare, and fundamentally altered the concept of strategic deterrence. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden history of these astonishing and often unsettling innovations. If this exploration of Hitler's lost superweapons resonated with you, please like this video, share it with others who are fascinated by the intersection of history and technology, and most importantly, comment your thoughts below. What do you find most surprising about these forgotten projects? And for more deep dives into the strategic technologies that continue to shape our world, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell.